Okay. So we all know the saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Right.
But when it comes
To protecting your income.
So we all know the saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of like having that backup
But when it comes
basket.
to protecting your
You know,
income,
Yeah.
disability
just in case something
insurance.
happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is kind of like
But
having
here's
that
the thing
backup
that a
basket.
lot of people don't realize.
Yeah.
Just in case something happens.
Yeah.
The tax man might be
here's the
lurking
thing that a
around
lot of
ready to
people don't
snag a few of
realize.
those eggs from that basket too.
That's right.
The tax
Yeah.
man might be
So today
lurking
we're gonna
around
do a
ready to
deep
snag a
dive
few of those
into
eggs from that
disability
basket
insurance
too.
That's right.
taxation.
Yeah.
We're
So
going to
today
figure
we're gonna
out
do
what's
a deep
taxable,
dive
what isn't,
into disability
and why
insurance
it all
taxation.
matters so much.
Yeah,
We're going to
it's
figure out
surprising,
what's
you know,
taxable,
this
what
is one of
isn't,
those topics that
and
so
why
many
it
people
all
just
matters
don't
so
really,
much.
yeah, it's surprising, you know,
They don't
this
really
is one
think
of those
about it
topics
much.
that
Right.
so
They
many
plan
people
for
just don't
retirement,
really,
right.
but disability, which
They don't really think
statistically
about
is
it
way more
much.
likely
Right.
to happen,
They plan for
often gets
retirement.
overlooked. But
It's true.
disability,
It's like we
which
all think we're
statistically is
invincible
way
until
more
something
likely to
happens.
happen,
Yeah.
often gets
So-
overlooked.
It's
Let's
true.
kind of
It's like
unpack
we all
this a
think
little
we're
bit.
invincible
I
until
guess
something
first,
happens.
Yeah.
We should start
So,
with
let's
there
kind
are
of
basically
unpack this
two
a little
types of
bit.
disability
I guess
insurance.
first,
That's right.
there are
we should start with
the group plans.
there are
which
basically
most
two
people
types of
probably have
disability
through their
insurance.
employer.
That's right.
There are
And then there are
the group
individual
plans,
policies that
which
you can
most
buy
people
on your
probably
own.
have
That is
through their
correct,
employer.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
then
you
there
know,
are individual
the way the
policies
taxes
that you
work
can
on
buy on
those
your
is
own.
really
That is
different
correct,
depending on
yes.
how those premiums
And,
were paid.
you know,
Oh, okay.
the
Yeah,
way the
so it's
taxes
kinda like,
work on those is really
I always
different
think of it like
depending on how
planting
those
a
premiums
seed.
were paid.
Okay.
If you
Oh,
plant
okay.
a
Yeah,
seed
so
with
it's kind of like
pre-tax dollars,
I always think of it
then
like
the fruit it
planting a
bears
seed
is going to be
Okay.
taxed.
If you plant a seed
But if you
with
plant it with
pre-tax dollars, then the
you get
fruit
to
it
enjoy
bears
that
is going to be
fruit
tax-free.
Okay.
I like
But
that
if you
analogy.
plant it with
Yeah.
post-tax
That makes it really
dollars,
easy to
then you get to
kinda
enjoy that fruit
visualize.
tax-free.
Yeah.
I
So for
like
most
that
people out
analogy.
there who
Yeah.
have,
That makes it really easy to,
they have a job and they're
visualize.
getting that.
Yeah.
So for
disability
most people
insurance
out
through
there
their
who
employer,
have, is it pretty
they
safe
have a
to
job
assume
and
that
they're
those are
getting
kind
that
of pre-tax
disability
seeds
insurance
that
through
their
their
employer?
Usually,
Is it
yes.
pretty safe to assume
a lot
that
of
those are
employers
kind
will
of
treat those
pre-tax
premiums
seeds that
as
they're
like
planting?
A business expense.
Usually,
you
yes.
know,
Okay.
A
they
lot of
deduct it from their
employers will treat
taxes,
those
which
premiums
means
as
the
like
premiums
a
are
business
effectively
expense,
paid with
you know?
pre-tax
Okay.
dollars.
Yeah.
They
So that
deduct
makes
it from
the
their
benefits
taxes,
taxable
which means the
later on.
premiums are
So
effectively
even if your
paid
group
with
plan
pre-tax
says,
dollars. So
hey,
that makes the
we're going to
benefits
replace
taxable
60% of your
later on.
income. So
Mm.
even
Or
if your group
70%,
plan
whatever
says,
it is,
Right.
hey, we're going to
you
replace
might actually be
60%
in
of
for
your
a bit of a
income,
surprise
or 70%,
come
whatever
tax
it is,
time.
Right.
because you got to pay
You
taxes
might
on that
actually
money.
be in
Yeah,
for a
that's
bit of a
right.
surprise
And that's not the
come
only
tax
surprise.
time.
Oh,
because
no.
you
Yeah,
got to
there
pay
are
taxes
three
on that money.
other
Yeah,
big
that's right.
things that can really
And that's
shrink
not the
those
only
benefits
surprise.
down.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
those
those
are
three other big
SSDI
things that can really
offset.
shrink
Okay.
those benefits
Taxes,
down,
which we've touched
Okay.
on
and
a
those
little
are
bit.
Right.
And
SSDI,
inflation.
Okay, let's break
offset,
those down a
Okay.
little bit. So
Taxes, which we've
SSDI,
touched on
first
a
of all,
little
what
bit.
is that?
Right.
and inflation.
SSDI stands
Okay, let's
for
break those down a
Social
little bit.
Security
So
Disability
SSDI,
Insurance.
first of all, what is
Okay.
that?
So it's a federal
SSDI
program,
stands for
and
Social
if you
Security
happen to
Disability
qualify for
Insurance.
both SSDI and
So it's a
the
federal
long-term
program,
disability
and
benefits
if you
from your
happen
group
to
plan,
qualify
a
for
lot of
both
times your
SSDI
LTD
and the
payout will be
long-term
reduced.
disability
Oh.
benefits
So it's
from
kind of
your
like
group
they're trying to
plan,
coordinate
a lot of
benefits
times
so that
your
you're not
LTD
getting
payout will
double
be
dipping.
reduced.
Okay, so it's
Oh,
not
okay.
necessarily
So it's kind of
replacing
like they're trying to
60% of your
coordinate
income,
benefits so that
but
you're
it's
not
60%
getting,
minus
double
whatever you're
dipping.
getting.
Okay, so it's not
SSDI.
necessarily
Exactly.
replacing
Yeah.
60%
And then on
of your
top of
income,
that, you
Yeah.
said the
but it's
tax man takes a
60%
bite.
minus whatever you're getting
So
from
how does that
SSDI.
work?
Exactly.
Well, we were
yeah.
just
And
talking
then on
about
top
how
of that,
those
you said the
group
tax man
plan
takes a
premiums
bite.
are often paid
So how does that
pre-tax.
work?
Right.
Well, we
That
were
means
just
that
talking
part of
about
your
how
benefit
those
is going to go
group
right
plan
back to the
premiums
IRS.
are often paid
Okay.
pre-tax.
And,
Right.
you know,
That
if
means
you're a
that
high
part of your
income earner,
benefit is
it
going to
can
go
be a
right
pretty
back to the
big
IRS
chunk
because of
Okay.
those tax
And,
brackets.
So
you
high
know,
earners
if
are
you're
kinda
a high
getting hit
income earner,
twice,
it can be
right?
a pretty
Yeah.
big
Because they
chunk
have this
because
bigger
of those
gap
tax
between their
brackets.
base
So
salary
high earners are kind of getting hit
and
twice.
total
Right.
compensation
Yeah.
because they
Right.
have
And
this
then
bigger
they're getting
gap between
taxed
their
at a
base
higher
salary
rate
on these
and
already
their
reduced
total
benefits.
compensation.
Exactly. Right.
And then they're getting
Yeah,
taxed
it's
at a
tough.
higher
Okay,
rate
so we've
on
got
these already reduced
SSDI
benefits.
offset.
Exactly.
We've got taxes.
Yeah, it's tough.
What about the
Okay, so
third
we've
thing you
got
mentioned?
SSDI
Inflation.
offset.
How does
We've
that
got
fit into
taxes.
all of this?
What about the
Well, think
third
about
thing
it
you
this way.
mentioned? Inflation.
Imagine you get a
How
certain
does that
benefit
fit into
amount
all of this?
today.
Okay.
Now,
think about
let's
it
fast
this way.
forward 10 years. Imagine you
That
get
same
a certain
amount of money
benefit
is not
amount
going to buy you
today.
nearly as
Okay.
much.
Now,
Right.
let's fast
And
forward 10
unfortunately,
years.
a lot of group
That
LTD
same amount of
benefits
money is
aren't
not gonna buy
adjusted
you
for
nearly as
inflation.
much.
Oh, wow.
Right.
So their
And
value just
unfortunately, a lot of
erodes
group
over
LTD
time.
benefits
So this is really
aren't
starting to
adjusted
sound
for
like a recipe
inflation.
for a
Oh, wow.
pretty
So their
serious
value just
financial
erodes
shortfall.
over time.
Even if
So
you
this
have,
is really
you know, what
starting to
seems
sound
like
like
a
a recipe
generous
for a
60%
pretty
or
serious
70%
financial
coverage.
shortfall.
That's exactly
Even if
right.
you
You
have,
really
you
have
know,
to
what
look
seems like a
beyond those
generous
percentages.
60% or 70%
You know, remember that
coverage.
example in the source
That's
material
exactly
about
right.
the
You really
dental
have to look
assistant who was
beyond those
making
percentages.
$39,000.
You know, remember that
Yeah, they had
example in
that
the source
group plan.
material about the
Right.
And it
dental
promised
assistant who was
60%,
making
which, you know, on paper
$39,000
sounds
a
like
year.
yeah, they had that
decent
group
chunk of
plan,
change,
like,
Right.
and it promised
$23,000,
$60%,
$400
which, you know,
per year,
on
right?
paper
Yeah, it
sounds like
does.
a
But then they
decent chunk of
qualified for
change,
like
$1,000 a month in
per year,
SSDI.
right?
Yeah,
Oh,
it does.
okay.
Which then they
brought
qualify
their
for like
LTD payment down
$1,000
to
a month in
$950 a
SSDI.
month.
Oh, okay.
And then on
Which
top of that,
brought
remember
their
their
LTD
LTD
payment down to
paid those premiums
$950
with
a month.
pre-tax dollars.
And then
Right.
on top
So we
of
got
that,
to factor
remember
their
their
taxes
employer
and then
paid
Sprinkle
those
in a little
premiums
inflation
with
to erode
pre-tax
the value
dollars.
over time.
So we got to factor
Exactly.
in
And
taxes
suddenly,
and then
they could
Sprinkle
be
in a little
looking at less than
inflation to erode the
$10,000 a
value
year
over
even
time.
though that
Exactly.
initial
And
promise was
suddenly
60%.
they could
Yeah,
be
that's
looking
a
at less than
huge difference.
$10,000 a
That is a
year,
huge difference.
even though that
Okay,
initial
so we've been
promise
talking
was
about group
60%.
disability
Yeah,
plans.
that's a huge
And we've seen how those
That
can
is a huge
sometimes be a little
difference.
tricky with the
Okay,
taxes.
so we've been
and
talking about
everything.
group
Right.
disability
What about
plans,
those
and
individual
we've seen how
policies
those
that we
can
mentioned
sometimes
earlier?
be a little
Are
tricky
those
with the
taxed the
taxes
same
and
way?
everything.
Right.
No,
What
actually,
about
this
those
is where things
individual
get kind of
policies that we
interesting.
mentioned
Okay.
earlier?
So if
Are
you
those taxed
buy
the
an
same way?
individual disability
No, actually,
policy
this
with
is
your
where
own money
things get
after
kind of
taxes have been
interesting.
taken
Okay.
out. So if
The
you
benefits
buy
are
an
usually
individual disability
tax-free.
policy with your own money
Okay.
after remember
taxes
our
have been
seed
taken out.
analogy?
Yeah.
The benefits are
You
usually
planted that
tax-free.
seed with post-tax dollars.
Remember
so you
our
get to
seed
enjoy
analogy?
that
Yeah.
fruit.
Yep.
You planted that
So
seed with
no need to
post-tax
share
dollars,
those
so
eggs
you
with the
get to
tax
enjoy
man.
that
That's right. You
fruit
already paid
tax-free.
taxes on that
So
money.
no
Okay.
need to share
So the
those
IRS
eggs with the
basically
tax man.
That's
sees
right.
those
You already paid
benefits
taxes
as a
on that
return
money.
of your
Okay.
own money.
Not
So the
as
IRS
taxable
basically
income.
Wow,
sees
okay,
those
so that's a pretty
benefits as a
significant advantage for
return of
individual
your own
policies,
money,
right?
not
Yeah.
as taxable
But I'm guessing there's
income.
got to be
Wow,
a catch.
okay, so
well,
that's a
there are
pretty
always
significant
trade-offs.
advantage for
You know,
individual policies,
individual
right?
policies sometimes
But I'm
have
guessing
higher
there's got to be a
premiums.
catch.
Okay.
Well,
And the
there are
underwriting
always trade-offs.
process can be
You
a
know,
little
individual
more,
policies sometimes have higher
strict because
premiums.
they're looking
Okay.
at your
And the
specific
underwriting
health
process can
history
be a
and your
little more
circumstances.
So they're really taking a
strict
close look at
because
your
they're looking at your
basket to
specific
decide how much to
health
charge
history
for
and your
insuring those eggs.
circumstances.
So they're really taking a
Exactly.
close look at your
But for a lot of
basket to
people, that
decide
peace
how
of
much to
mind and
charge for
knowing that they're
insuring
going to
those
get those
eggs. huh?
tax-free
Exactly.
benefits is,
But for a lot of
yeah,
people,
worth
that
it.
peace
It's
of
worth the
mind and
potential
knowing
extra
that they're
cost.
going to
Yeah.
get those tax-free
Okay, so it sounds like it's really a
benefits
balancing
is,
act, kind of
yeah.
weighing those tax It's worth the benefits potential against extra the cost. potentially
Yeah.
higher cost.
Okay,
so
it
it
Yeah.
sounds like it's really a
Figuring what
balancing
makes
act,
sense
kind of
for each
weighing those
individual
tax
person.
benefits against the
Absolutely.
potentially higher costs.
And there's a lot more to
Yeah.
consider
Figuring
too when
what
you're
makes sense
choosing a
for each
disability
individual
insurance
person.
policy.
Absolutely.
We'll get into all of that in the
And
next
there's a
part of
lot
our
more to
deep dive.
consider too when you're
Welcome
choosing a
back to our
disability
deep
insurance
dive
policy.
into
We'll get into all of
disability
that in the
insurance
next part of our
taxation.
deep dive.
So
Welcome
far,
back
we've
to our
planted
deep
some
dive
seeds,
into
we've
disability insurance
visualized some
taxation.
fruit, and
So
we've
far, we've
uncovered some
planted some
potential
seeds,
we've some potential surprises,
visualized some
maybe,
fruit,
lurking,
and we've
those
uncovered
group
some
disability
potential
plans.
Right,
some
those
potential
pre-tax
surprises,
seeds,
maybe,
as convenient as they
lurking
might seem at
in those
first.
group disability
We've seen
plans.
how they
Right,
can lead
those
to
pre-tax
a,
seeds,
as convenient
a
as they might
smaller
seem at
harvest than you
first.
might
Right.
expect.
We've
when
seen
those
how they can
benefits
lead
become
to
taxable.
Yeah, that's right.
A smaller
Especially when you
harvest
factor
than
in
you
that
might expect
SSDI
when those
offset, the
benefits
taxes
become
and inflation.
taxable.
Right.
Yeah,
But
that's
before
right.
we move on
Especially
to
when you
those
factor in that
tempting,
SSDI offset, the
tax-free
taxes and inflation.
fruits
Right.
From individual
But before we move
policies,
on to those
I did have a
tempting,
question about group plans.
tax-free
What if
fruits
someone switches
from individual
jobs
policies,
and their
I did
new
have a question
employer
about
has
group
a different
plans.
type of
Okay.
plan? What if
Oh,
someone
yeah, that
switches
happens a
jobs
lot.
Yeah.
and
So
their new
let's say you
employer
move from
has
a
a different
company
type of plan?
where the premiums
Oh,
were
yeah,
paid
that happens a lot.
pre-tax.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And you
let's
go
say
to a
you
company
move
where
from a
they're paid
company
with after-tax
where the premiums
dollars.
were paid
Okay, would that mean that their
pre-tax,
benefits are now
and you go to a
completely
company where they're
tax-free?
paid with after-tax
Not
dollars.
necessarily.
Okay, would that
no.
mean that their
The
benefits are
portion
now
of your
completely
benefit that's
tax-free?
tied to those
Not
earlier
necessarily,
pre-tax
no.
premiums.
Oh, okay.
The
Would still be
portion of your
taxable.
benefit
Got it.
that's
The
tied
IRS
to those
keeps track
earlier
of each
pre-tax
seed
premiums
you plant,
would still be
so to
taxable.
speak.
So
Got it.
even though
The
you're now
IRS keeps
contributing
track
with
of
after-tax
each
dollars,
seed you plant,
you can't
so to
fully
speak.
escape
So
the tax
even though you're now
consequences of that
contributing
previous
with
plan.
after-tax
That's right.
dollars, okay, that
you
makes
can't
sense.
fully
It really
escape
highlights
the
why
tax
it's important to
consequences of that previous
understand the
plan.
details
That's right.
of every
Okay, that
plan
makes
that you're
sense.
enrolled
It really
in.
highlights why it's
Throughout
important
your
to,
whole career,
to
basically.
Yeah,
understand the
exactly.
details
And
of
speaking of
every
details, I
plan
remember,
that you're enrolled in.
we were talking about
Throughout
how
your whole
important
career,
documentation
Yeah,
is and all of
exactly.
that. And
Oh,
speaking of details, I
absolutely, yeah.
remember
So
we were talking
if
about how
you
important
ever
documentation is and
need
all
to
of this.
file
Oh,
a disability
absolutely,
claim.
yeah.
So
Right.
if
you're
you
going to need to
ever
prove how those premiums
need
were
to
paid.
file a
Were
disability
they pre-tax or post-tax?
Right. And exactly.
You're going to need
Yep.
to
So
prove
keeping
how those
good
premiums
records
were
is
paid.
really
Right.
key.
Were they
It
pre-tax
is.
or
It is
post-tax?
because
And
you know you don't
exactly.
want any
Yep.
confusion
So keeping
with
good
the IRS
records
when
is
tax
really
season
key.
rolls
It
around.
is.
Right,
It is
Exactly.
Because,
So hold
you
on
don't
to those
want any
plan
confusion with
documents,
the
your pay
IRS when
stubs,
tax season
anything that
rolls around.
shows.
Right, exactly.
You know,
So
hold on to
confirms how
those
your
plan
benefits were
documents,
taxed.
your pay
It's like
stubs,
safeguarding your
anything that
harvest,
shows.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
You know,
Okay, so I'm
confirms
definitely
how your
getting the
benefits
message
were
here.
taxed.
It's like
Stay
safeguarding your
organized.
harvest, right?
That's a great way to
Be
put it.
proactive.
Okay, so I'm definitely getting the
don't
message
just
here.
assume everything's
Stay
going to
organized.
magically work
Yeah.
itself out
Be
later.
proactive.
Exactly.
Okay, so
You know,
before
don't
we
just
move on
assume
completely
everything's
to
going
those
to magically
individual
work itself out
policies.
later.
Right.
Let's
exactly.
circle
Okay,
back
so
to
before
that
we move on
potential
completely
shortfall we
to
were
those
talking about
individual
earlier.
policies,
Okay. Even with those,
let's circle back to
seemingly
that really
potential
nice
shortfall we were
60%
talking
or
about
70%
earlier.
group
Okay.
plans.
Even with those,
Right.
things can still get
really
get a little
nice
tricky.
60% or
They can.
70% group plans.
The dental
Right.
assistant
Things can
example.
still get you know,
a little tricky.
really highlighted how the
can.
SSDI
The
offsets,
dental assistant example,
taxes, inflation, all that
you
stuff.
know, really
can shrink
highlighted
those
how the
benefits
SSDI
down
offsets
significantly.
taxes,
It does.
inflation,
So is
all
that where
stuff
individual
can shrink those
disability
benefits
insurance
down
significantly?
kind of
Yeah.
steps
It
in to
does.
save
So
the
is
day.
that where
Well, it
individual
can,
disability
yeah.
insurance?
Remember, with an individual policy,
steps in
you're
to save
using
the
your
day.
own
Well, it
after-tax
can, yeah.
dollars to
Okay.
fund it.
Remember,
Right.
with
So
an
those
individual
benefits are generally
policy,
tax-free.
you're using your
which,
own
you know,
after-tax
that can be a
dollars
big
to
deal.
fund it.
Yeah, it's
Right.
like having
So
a
those
protective
benefits are
shield
generally
against all those
tax-free,
benefit
which,
shrinking
you
factors
know,
we've been talking
that can be
about.
a
I
big
like
deal.
that. That's
Yeah.
a good
It's like having a
analogy.
protective
So individual
shield against all
disability
those
insurance
benefit
can kind of
shrinking
help fill
factors
in those
we've been
gaps.
talking
Yeah,
about.
I like
They're
that. That's a
left
good analogy.
by
So
group
individual
plans
disability
and
insurance
provide
can
a more
kind of help fill in
kind
those
of
gaps.
reliable income
that are
stream
left
Exactly.
if
by
you become
group
disabled,
plans
Yeah.
and provide a
but
more kind of
I'm
reliable
guessing it's not like
income
a perfect
stream
Exactly.
magic
if you become
solution.
disabled.
Well, there are
But
always trade-offs.
I'm guessing
Okay,
it's not
so
like a perfect
what are some of the
magic
drawbacks
solution.
to individual
Well, there are
policies?
always
Well,
trade-offs.
as we mentioned earlier, the
Okay,
premiums
so
can be
what
higher
are some of the
Okay.
drawbacks
than with
to
group plans,
individual
and
policies?
the underwriting
Well,
process,
as we mentioned earlier,
said,
it can be
the
more,
premiums can be higher,
more
Okay.
rigorous
than with group
Okay.
plans,
because
and
the
the
underwriting
insurers they're
process,
looking
as
at
we
your
said, it can be
individual
more,
risk,
more
Right.
rigorous
based on your health
Okay.
history,
because
your
the
job,
insurers
your
they're looking at
lifestyle,
your
all of
individual
that.
risk.
So they're really looking
Right.
closely
Based
at
on your
that
health
basket
history,
before
your
they
job,
decide
your
how much they're
lifestyle,
going to
all of
charge to
that.
insure those eggs.
So they're
huh?
really
Exactly,
looking closely
yeah.
at that basket before
Okay,
they
so it
decide
sounds like
how much they're going to
for a
charge
lot
to
of
insure
people,
those eggs.
though,
Huh?
Yeah, exactly.
that peace
yeah.
of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it sounds like
And those
for a
you know,
lot
nice
of people,
tax-free
though,
benefits,
that
Right.
peace of mind outweigh the
and those
nice
potential
tax-free
downsides.
benefits.
For a lot of
Right.
people, it does.
Yeah.
outweigh
Okay, so it seems like it's a really
the,
personal decision.
the potential
is.
weighing those
downsides.
For a
pros
lot
and
of people,
cons
it
based
does.
on
Yeah. Okay, so
you know,
it
your
seems like it's a
individual
really
situation.
personal decision.
Absolutely,
It is.
yeah.
Weighing
There's
those
no
pros and
one-size-fits-all
cons based
answer
on,
when it comes
you know,
to
your
disability
individual
insurance.
situation.
It's
Yeah.
all about
Absolutely,
finding the
yeah.
right fit for
There's
you.
no
Okay,
one-size-fits-all
so we've
answer
covered
when
the
it comes
basics
to
of both
disability
group
insurance. It's
and
all about
individual
finding the right
policies.
fit for you.
We've talked
Okay,
about
so we've covered the basics
pitfalls,
of
we've
both
looked at the
group
and
the
individual
tax-free
policies.
benefits.
Yeah.
We've talked
But
about the
I'm
potential
sure our listeners are
pitfalls,
probably
we've
like,
looked at
okay,
the,
that's all great, but
the tax-free
like,
benefits.
what do I
Yeah.
actually do?
But
Right.
I'm sure
Where
our
do you
listeners are
begin?
probably like,
That's a
okay,
great
that's all
question.
great,
Yeah.
but
Well, the first
what do
step
I
is to
actually
really
do?
take a look
Right.
at your
Where do I even
current
begin?
disability
That's a
insurance
great
coverage.
question.
yeah. Okay, so
Well, the
whether
first
it's a
step
group
is
plan
to
through
really
work
take a look at your
or an
current
individual
disability insurance
policy.
coverage.
Yeah.
You're
Okay,
saying
so
don't just
whether
like
it's a group plan through
file
work
it away
Right.
and forget
or an
about it.
individual
yeah,
policy.
exactly.
You really need
You're
to
saying
understand
don't
what it
just
says,
like
huh?
You really do.
File
yeah.
it away and
Okay.
forget
Don't
about
just
it.
skim the
yeah,
surface.
exactly.
You really need to
Really
understand what
dive
it
into
says,
that
huh?
You really
fine
do.
print.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pay
Don't
attention
just
to
skim the
how they
surface.
define disability,
Really dive into
the
that
benefit
fine
amount,
print.
the waiting
Okay.
period
Pay
before
attention
those
to
benefits kick
how
in,
they define
and how long that
disability,
coverage lasts.
the benefit
And of
amount,
course, how
the
those
waiting
premiums are
period before
paid
those
and whether
benefits
those
kick
benefits
in,
are gonna
and
be
how long that
taxable or not,
coverage
right?
lasts.
That's right. Yeah.
And of
that's
course, how those
crucial
premiums are
information
paid
for
and whether those benefits are going to
planning
be
your finances
taxable or
and for
not,
taxes.
right?
That's right. Yeah.
exactly.
That's
So once
crucial
you've
information
really,
for
dissected your current
planning your finances
coverage,
and
Okay.
for taxes.
you can figure out
Right,
if it
exactly.
really
So
meets
once
your
you've
needs or
really,
not. Dissected your current
for someone
coverage,
who's only
you can
relying
figure out if
on a
it
group
really
plan through
meets your
work,
needs or not.
what are
So,
some of the
for someone who's
kind of
only
key
relying
questions
on
they
a
should
group
be
plan
asking
through
themselves?
work?
Well, first of all, ask
What are
yourself,
some
is
of
the
the
coverage
kind
amount
of key
actually enough
questions
to
they should be
replace,
asking
a
themselves?
good
Well, first
chunk
of all,
my
ask
income
yourself,
if I
is
need
the
it?
coverage
Remember,
amount actually
those
enough
group
to
plans
replace,
are usually
you know,
based on
a
your
good
base
chunk of my
salary.
income
They
if I
don't
need it?
include
Remember,
bonuses or
those
any
group
other
plans are usually based on your base
salary.
salary.
And as we
They
talk
don't
about,
include
those benefits
bonuses
can
or
be
any
reduced
other,
by SSDI,
compensation you
by
might get.
taxes, and as we talk
eaten
about
away
those
by
benefits
inflation.
can be reduced
Exactly.
by
So if there's a big
SSDI,
difference between
by
your base
taxes,
salary and your
eaten
total
away by
income,
inflation.
exactly.
Or if
So
you're worried
there's
about
a big
those,
difference between your base salary and
those
your total
benefit
income,
shrinkers.
Right.
or
It
if
might
you're
be a
worried
good
about
idea to
those,
think about
supplementing
those
that
benefit
group plan
shrinkers.
with
Right.
an individual
It might be a good
policy.
idea
Okay,
to
so it's
think
like
about
adding a second,
supplementing
maybe a
that
little bit more
group plan
secure
with an
basket to
individual
hold those
policy.
eggs.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's like adding
So
a
let's say
second,
someone
maybe a
decides,
little bit
you know
more
what, I
secure
do need to look
basket
into
to
an
hold those
individual
eggs.
policy.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say
Where do they
someone
even
decides,
start?
you know what, I do need to look into an
Well,
individual
trying
policy.
to navigate the world of
Where do they
individual
even
disability insurance on your own.
Well,
Right.
can be,
Trying to
it can
navigate
be
the
tricky.
world of
Yeah.
individual
It's a specialized
disability
field. There's a lot of
insurance on your
nuances.
own.
Right.
Can be,
That's why I always say
it can be pretty
working with
tricky.
a
Yeah. It's a
knowledgeable,
specialized
experienced
field. There's a
insurance
lot of
professional is so
nuances.
important.
Right.
That's why I always
Okay,
say
so they can
working with
help
a
you kind
knowledgeable,
of wade
experienced
through
insurance
all those
professional is
options
so
and find the right
important.
policy.
Okay,
so they can
Exactly.
help
For your
you
specific
kind of
Exactly.
wade
They
through
can help
all
you
those
figure
options
out
and find the right
how
policy
much coverage
Exactly.
you should
for your
get,
specific need.
what type
Exactly.
of policy
They can
makes
help you
sense for
figure
your
out
job,
Right.
how much
and
coverage
any
you should
extra,
get,
Okay.
what type of
riders
policy
that you
makes
might
sense
need.
for your
Riders,
job.
what are those?
Right.
And any
riders, those are
extra,
like,
think of them like
riders that you might
optional
need.
add-ons to your
Riders, what are
policy.
those?
Okay.
Oh,
Some
riders, those
common
are like,
ones are like
think
cost
of
of
them
living
like
adjustments to
optional
help keep up with
add-ons to your
inflation.
policy.
Okay.
Some
And
common ones are like
future
cost of
increase
living adjustments to
options
help
so you
keep
can,
up with inflation.
boost your
Right.
coverage
And
as your income
future
goes up.
So they might add to the
options so
cost,
you
but
can,
they
Right.
boost your
but they can
coverage
provide some
as your
valuable
income goes up.
protection down the road.
So they
They
might
can,
add to the
yeah.
cost,
It's
but
all
they,
about weighing
Right.
those pros
but they can
cons.
provide some
Right.
valuable
And here's
protection down the
another
road.
They
pro
can,
tip.
yeah.
Right.
It's all about
Don't
weighing
just
those
take the
pros
first
and
quote you
cons.
get.
Right.
And
Shop
here's
around,
another pro tip.
compare
Right.
offers from
Don't
different
just take the
insurers.
first quote
Okay,
you
so
get.
it's kind of like you
Shop
wouldn't buy a
around,
car without,
compare
checking out a few
offers
different
from
models
different
first.
insurers.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's kind of like you
Exactly.
wouldn't
So
buy a car
each insurance
without,
company kind of
checking
has
out
their
a few
own
different models first.
Exactly.
Way of doing things.
Exactly.
They do, yeah.
So
They have their own
each
underwriting
insurance company
guidelines,
kinda
their own
has their own,
pricing, so it's really good to
way of
get
doing
multiple
things.
perspectives. They do, yeah. They have their
And
own
speaking of
underwriting
underwriting,
guidelines, their
remember
own
you mentioned
pricing, so it's really
the
good to get
definition of
multiple
disability
perspectives.
in individual
speaking of
policies.
underwriting,
Remember you
and
mentioned
how important that is.
the
It's
definition of
huge.
disability
What should
in
people
individual
be
policies,
kind of
and
looking
how
for
important
there?
that is.
Well,
It's huge.
you want to make
What
sure
should
that the
people
definition
be
matches
kind of
your occupation.
looking for there?
You know?
Well,
Okay.
the specific
you want to make sure
type
that
of
the
work that
definition
you do.
matches your
You want a policy
occupation,
that covers you.
Okay.
The specific
can't do your
type of
own
work
job.
that you do.
Right.
Not
You
just
want a
any
policy that
job.
covers
that's
you.
that's a really important
If you can't
distinction.
do
It
your
is,
own
it is.
job.
That could be
Right.
the difference
Not just
between
any
getting
job.
benefits
Okay,
and
that's-
not. That's a really important distinction.
Absolutely.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And
That
here's
could be the
another
difference
thing.
Okay.
between
Don't
getting
just
benefits
set it
and
and
not-
forget it.
Right.
You don't just buy a
Absolutely, yeah.
policy
And here's another
and then
thing.
assume
Okay.
that you're
Don't
covered
just
forever.
set it
No,
and
no, no.
forget it.
Okay,
Right.
Things change.
You don't just
right,
buy
right.
a
You get
policy
married, you have kids,
and then assume that
new
you're
job,
covered forever.
your
No,
income
no, no.
goes
Okay.
up. Things change. Right.
All of
Right.
these
You get
things can
married, you
affect
have kids,
how much disability
new
insurance
job,
you need.
your income
So
goes
regular
up.
checkups
All
for your
of these
insurance,
things can affect
just
how
like
much
you get for your health.
disability insurance
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
need.
So
Make it a
regular
habit
checkups
to review
for your
your coverage
insurance,
every year. Maybe
just
around
like
the
you get
same
for your
time you're
health.
reviewing your
Exactly.
other
Yeah.
financial goals.
Make it a
Right.
habit to
and,
review your
and,
coverage
make
every year. Maybe
adjustments
around the
as
same time
needed
you're reviewing
Okay,
your
so
other financial
by
goals.
really taking a
and
proactive
make
approach
adjustments as needed.
to
Okay, so
disability insurance,
By really taking
we can
a
make sure that we're
proactive
not just
approach protecting
to
our
disability
income,
insurance,
but we're also
we
protecting
can
our
make sure
lifestyle,
that we're not
Right.
just
our dreams, our
protecting our
ability to take
income.
care of our family. But
It's
we're also
about having
protecting
that
our
safety net
lifestyle.
in place.
Right.
So
Our
if something
dreams, our
happens,
ability to
you
take
can
care of our
focus on
family.
getting better.
It's about
Right.
having that
Without
safety
added
net in
stress of
place.
worrying
So if
about
something
money.
And
happens,
that's really what it's all
you can
about,
focus
right?
on getting
It is,
better.
yeah.
Right.
Without
But there's
that
one
added
more
stress of
thing,
worrying
one
about
more
money.
aspect
And that's really
of
what it's all
disability
about,
insurance
right?
that I
It
think a
is,
lot of
yeah.
people. But there's one more thing, one more
kinda
aspect
overlook.
of disability insurance.
Welcome
that I
back
think
to our
a lot
deep
of people.
dive.
We're here for the final part of
Kinda
our look at
overlooked.
disability insurance taxation.
Welcome back to our deep
And
dive.
Wow, we have covered.
We're
a
here
lot of
for the
ground.
final part
from
of our
those
look
pre-tax
at
disability
seeds,
insurance taxation,
and
wow, we have covered a lot of ground.
sometimes
From
taxable
those
fruit
pre-tax
Right.
seeds
to the tax-free
and
benefits
they're
of individual policies.
sometimes taxable
We've
fruit,
shopped around
Right.
for some
to the tax-free
metaphorical
benefits,
baskets
made sure they were
of
nice and
individual
sturdy.
policies
Yeah.
to hold
We've
all those
shopped
precious
around for
eggs.
some
Those are good
metaphorical
eggs. We wanna
baskets,
protect
made sure they
them.
were nice
Absolutely.
and sturdy.
Yeah.
to hold all those precious eggs.
Before
Those
we
are
wrap things
good
up
eggs. We want to
completely,
protect them.
I think it's important to kind
Absolutely.
of shift gears
But
a little bit.
before
Okay.
we
and
before
talk
we
about
wrap things up completely,
I think
the
it's
human
important to
side
kind
of
of shift
disability
gears a little bit
because
Okay.
at the end of the
and
day,
talk
it's not
about,
just about numbers,
right?
Yeah,
The human
not at
side
all.
of
It's not just about
disability.
tax codes
Because
and policies
at the end of the
and
day,
all
it's
that.
not just
about
numbers,
real
right?
people
Not
and
at
their
all.
lives.
It's not just about tax codes and
Exactly. It can
policies
happen
and
to
all that.
anyone.
It's
Doesn't matter
about
how old you are,
real
how much
people
money you
and their
make, what
lives.
you do
Exactly.
for a living.
It can happen to
and
anyone.
it can have
Doesn't
a
matter
huge
how old
impact,
you are, you know,
how much money
Yeah.
you make,
financially
what
and
you do for a
emotionally.
Right, and I
living.
think it's easy to
And
get
it can have a
really
huge
caught up
impact,
in the details
you know?
of policies,
Yeah.
and
Financially and
premiums all
emotionally.
that.
Right, and I think
But
it's
it's
easy
important
to
to
get
remember
really caught
that
up in the details of
behind
policies
every
and
single one of
premiums and all
those
that.
claims, but it's important
There's
to
a person
remember
with
that
their own
behind
hopes and
every
dreams and
single one of those
responsibilities and all of
claims,
that.
That's right.
There's a
And
person
that's why I think
with,
it's so important
their
to
own hopes and
approach
dreams
this
and
whole topic of
responsibilities and all of
disability
that.
insurance.
That's right.
And that's why I
With,
think it's so
you know, a
important
sense of
to
empathy,
approach this
with
whole topic of
understanding.
disability
Yeah.
insurance.
Because these
with,
policies,
you know,
they
a
aren't
sense
just
of
contracts.
empathy,
They
with
represent a
understanding.
promise.
Yeah, right.
Because
A
these
promise to
policies,
support
they aren't just
somebody
contracts.
during a really
they represent
tough time.
a promise
to
A
help them,
promise to support
maintain their
somebody
independence,
during
their
a
dignity.
really tough time.
And that's really,
A
I
promise
think,
to-
why we
to
wanted
help
to
them,
do this deep dive.
maintain their independence,
all
their
about,
dignity,
and that's really, I
demystifying
think, why we
disability
wanted to
insurance
do this
taxation.
deep dive.
To give
It's all about,
you, the knowledge that you
demystifying
need to
disability
make those smart
insurance
choices
taxation.
Yeah.
and protect
To
yourself and your
give
family.
you
Because when it
the
comes to
knowledge that you
disability,
need
you know,
to make
knowledge
those smart
isn't just
choices
power,
and
it's
protect
peace
yourself
of
and your
mind.
family.
Because
Yeah.
when it
Knowing
comes
that
to
you've got that
disability,
safety
you know,
net.
knowledge
can
isn't
isn't
focus
just
on
power,
getting better
it's peace
Yeah.
of mind.
without that
Yeah.
added
Knowing that
stress
you've got
of-
that
of
safety
money
net.
worries.
That you
Right,
can focus
exactly.
on
So
getting
as
better.
we come
Yeah.
to the end
Without
of
that
our
added
little journey
stress
here,
of
I want to
money
leave our
worries.
Right,
listeners
exactly.
with one
So
final
as we
thought.
come to the end
Disability
of our
insurance.
little journey here,
It's not just
I
a
wanna leave our
financial
listeners
product.
with
It's
one
a
final
promise.
thought.
It's a promise to yourself,
Disability
to your
insurance.
family.
It's
that
not
you'll
just a financial
be there
product.
for each
It's a
other,
promise.
no matter
It's a
what.
promise
That's a
to
good way to
yourself,
put it.
to your
It's a
family,
commitment to
that
protect your
you'll
future.
be there
Exactly.
for each other,
And
no matter
while
what.
That's
you
a
know,
good way
none
to
of
put
us
it. It's
ever
a
want to have to
commitment to
use it.
protect your
That
future.
peace of mind
Exactly.
that it gives you,
And while
it's priceless.
none of us
really
ever
is.
want to
So
have to
take
use
the time, do your
that peace of
research,
mind
talk
that
to a
gives you,
professional if
it's
you need
priceless.
to,
It
and
really
make those
is.
informed
So
decisions.
take the time,
Because
do your
when it comes to
research,
protecting
talk
your
to a
future,
professional if you need
knowledge
to,
and preparation,
and make those informed
those are your
decisions.
best
Because when it
friends.
comes to
That's
protecting
right.
your future,
Well, thank you for joining us
knowledge
for
and
this deep
preparation,
dive into
those are
disability
your
insurance
best friends.
taxation.
That's
We
right.
hope you learned
Well,
a
thank you
lot.
for joining us for
And
this
remember,
deep dive into
your future
disability
is worth
insurance
protecting.
taxation. We